My name is Liza Howard. I'm one of the coaches at Sharman Ultra, along with Ian Sharman and Ellie Greenwood and Sean Meisner and Dr. Matt Lay. And a little bit about myself. I've been coaching for about the last 10 years, a good chunk of that with Ian at Sharman Ultra. And I live in San Antonio, Texas, and that's where I do most of my running. I also teach for Knowles Wilderness Medicine, so I teach a bunch of the wilderness first aid and wilderness first responder courses, and I direct a nonprofit called Band of Runners, which serves veterans by bringing them into the trail running community. Let's see, I have two youngish kids along with those jobs, and so I specialize, or the people that I really enjoy coaching are folks that have complicated lives where they have a lot of responsibilities and not much time, and I really enjoy figuring out how to make training work for those folks and ensuring that they also get to sleep. I find that really challenging and rewarding. And as far as my running background goes, I did not run in high school or college, really. I started running marathons in my 20s or so, and then I fell into the trail running world not until my, I guess, mid 30s or so. And then one thing led to another, and I was running 100-mile races. And so I've run a lot of the races down here in Texas. I've run Leadville a number of times. I've moved to the 100K road distance as well, and so that's me running wise. I've won a number of races. I've made a lot of mistakes at races, and so those combined make me a pretty effective coach. All right, so I have some questions that folks have sent in already, so I'll start with those. The first one is from Amanda, and Amanda asks, "What training and racing mistakes have you made and learned from?" So this is the only question that we'll deal with this entire live session. So many, Amanda, so many mistakes. So let's see. The first year I ran Leadville, I put my water bottles in my puffy jacket pockets before the race, because that race starts at an obnoxiously early time. And I had my racing vest on, and then right before the race started, I handed my puffy jacket to a friend with the water bottles in it, and I took off and did not realize that I had done that for a while. And so I learned, never put your water bottles anywhere besides your racing vest. I'm trying to think. I have tried new recipes for race foods prior to a race. That has always failed me, and yet I continue to try. Just recently, I made rice balls for an event, and I tried to travel with them, and they did not travel very well, and they were inedible during the race itself. Let's see. Trying new gear for a race, that has not served me well. I'm trying to think what other big mistakes that I've made during races. Oh, just kind of assuming that the weather was going to be good, despite the forecast. Just assuming that it wasn't going to rain during a race, and so just not prepping for that. So not bringing the rain gear or an extra layer. So I've suffered for that. So I've learned to assume that, yeah, there's going to be bad weather during this race. So I guess those are the bigger ones. But like I said, we could go on forever. And I do think that, when you have a coach that does a lot of racing, it's helpful because everybody makes mistakes. And so you can share, it's easy for me to be like, I've gone out and done dumb things for you so that you don't have to. All right. And then we have another one. I've read that you use Tailwind, but do you supplement with more nutrition during ultras? During hot races, when I am drinking a lot, then I'll just do liquid nutrition because my stomach over time has become really finicky. And so liquid nutrition tends to sit really well. But if it's colder, you can't drink as much or you'll get overhydrated. And so I'll eat small things. I like jelly beans and I think that, anything that's going to sit well in your stomach and going to stay there and not be vomited up is good. I've reached kind of my max level of taking gels in at this point in my life. Like I I cannot eat those anymore. And so I try to find things that are small for me to take in. And so a lot of little candy type things, sometimes chomps or things like that I can do. And I used to be able to do real food, and I really enjoyed that, but no more. And like I said, the rice balls did not work very well. So yeah, so I like and not sports beans, but just pure jelly beans. Yep, they're small, they taste good. I think the key with race nutrition is it should be something that you're happy about eating, that you're not having to force down. And so, something to look forward to. And so sometimes I'll just, put a nice big cookie in my pocket and eat that. That's going to stay down better for me than a gel will. So there's that. Alrighty, so any unusual tips, tricks, or strategies for racing, training, recovery that you've picked up? I wish I had like some sort of trick. I would say kind of overall that I have discovered that sleep is really important. I think that as for recovery, but also for racing really well and training really well, that, for me, I try to block out 8 hours. I can usually manage 7 hours, and then I build my schedule around that. And I find that if I am not getting at least that much sleep, I don't train well. And I mean, before a race, it's hard to get good sleep. But I certainly don't train well if I'm not getting enough sleep. And then the race usually falls apart because of that. So really prioritizing sleep is my trick. Let's see here. A few of your favorite courses. Let's see. I have run Leadville 4 times, and so that is one of my favorite courses, and I've crewed out there a bunch. I met my husband out working for Outward Bound in the Leadville area, and so that has a very special place in my heart. I love the courses down here in Texas. I love the hill country running, all the technical trails. Yeah, so I have a lot of affection for Leadville, but I think probably race courses, most anything down here in the hill country in Texas is pretty wonderful. So those are good. Alrighty, let's see. I have some other questions over here. People saying hi, they're so good. Ian prompting y'all to ask questions. Rebecca, what is your favorite mental strategy to prepare for a new hard race? So I think that one of the things that I do when I go into a race is just agree with myself that I'm willing to be out there for the entire time that the course is allowing me to be out there. So basically saying like, hey, the cutoff for this race is 30 hours or 36 hours. Am I willing to be out here that long? And I need to be able to be willing to be out there that long, because who knows what can happen during a race. And I think it's just so easy when things go wrong during a race and you're not running as fast as you wanted to run, or not hitting the goals that you set for yourself, for your race to implode, right? But if you always have that well, I agreed to be out here for this long, right? And even at this altered pace that I'm going, I'm still going to be done before that time. I think it's like when you're afraid of flying and you get on a plane and you're like, listen, I am not going to be afraid this entire flight. Like if I'm going to buy a ticket and get on this plane, I'm not going to spend the entire time being afraid. I'm really afraid of flying. This is what I do. I'm like, if I'm going to get on the plane, I'm not going to be afraid. And same thing with an ultra race. I feel like it's really powerful to say hey, if I cross this start line, what I'm saying is I'm willing to be out here until they pull me off the course. And then that just takes so much pressure off of your performance. And of course you don't want to be out there that long, right? But just without that pressure, it kind of allows you to then do what you need to do. I think the other thing too, and I think that this mindset is huge with ultra running, is that you have to have this appreciation for kind of things going sideways and having an adventure. If that's not part of, and just to have that kind of in the forefront of your mind, because if that's not part of what makes you want to do these ultras, then when the running doesn't go the way that you were intending, then there's nothing left. But, when you go in there and you're remembering that, no, I like the problem solving. I like the adventure. I like challenges. If I didn't, I would be just doing road 10Ks. Not that those aren't challenging. Those are horribly challenging, but just in a very, in a different kind of more straightforward way, right? We had a fellow who did the Tanajas 100K this past weekend, and like he got lost. He fell in water. It turned out there wasn't any water at the race, and he didn't realize that. And he just kind of at one point kind of did this kind of Lieutenant Dan type moment of just embracing it. It's like, all right, what else do you have here, course? I'm going to do this. And he was super successful. And so to answer your question, I think this, like the mental state needs to be like, I value both this running and I have some goals. But the reason I'm an ultra runner is because I value kind of the absurdity of the adventure that might happen out here as well, and to be able to easily switch when things do go sideways. And then the other one would be just to expect things to go sideways, and sometimes not in some sort of disastrous falling in water and 30-degree weather kind of way, but just like to expect to feel awful or to expect to not want to do it anymore. I think that's what surprises people sometimes, where they're like, I can overcome, something because I've got this grit and like I'm ready for that. But then, like when the will to do it disappears, you're like, oh, I could finish and I have no desire to. Like this is dumb, which is true. It's a silly, it's an objectively silly sport. So to just have a reason, and we've talked about this, Rebecca, like, have these reasons that you think it's useful for you to complete something that you can tap into during the race. So, all right. What strategies do you use to minimize aid station time at ultras? Leah, I am a huge fan of the index card. And so I'll just write down like what's supposed to happen at the aid station. And if I have crew there, like they have that card. And so they know, they're like, Liza needs to like empty out her pockets. We need to give her a headlamp. We need to, ask her if she wants to spit out her gum. I don't chew gum. Anyway, so that it's all just written there, so I don't have to do any thinking. And similarly, like if I don't have crew, like I will pull out the index card and like, what am I supposed to do? Like change my shoes or change my socks or, I get rid of my headlamp. I think that makes things go very quickly. I think that using the water bottles up front, they're easier and faster to fill than a hydration bladder. So that's something. I think, thinking about like, how much can I carry with me where the load isn't slowing me down a lot, but that I'm not having to spend a lot of time at the aid stations because I already have it with me. Especially if the aid stations are going to be real crowded, and it's hard to get through. And now, kind of right now with what's going on with COVID, sometimes it can be slower to get through these aid stations. And so trying to be a little bit more self-sufficient can be helpful. Alrighty. With your work with Band of Runners, what have you learned that you brought to ultra training? That's a great question, Dean. So Band of Runners is the nonprofit that I help direct, and basically we put on a trail running camp for veterans annually, and it's free to them. And we just bring all these ultra runners and trail runners from all over the United States and Canada to be mentors and teach, kind of the fundamentals of trail running, from like, the very basics of trail running and form and things like that, to leave no trace, and nutrition and all this, so that these vets and their family members can leave the camp feeling very much a part of our community and able to go out and run safely. This year, because of COVID, what we've decided to do is train the vets that were going to come to camp for this for Scotty Coomer's Badger Trail series at the end of July, the 1st of August. And so we have 45 folks that we're training, and we're using Brian Powell's training guide in his book, Relentless Forward Progress. And so I guess, what have I learned? That's such a good question. Like, I've learned so much, and I think that I've learned on the one hand how much our community, the trail running community, wants to feel useful and in particular be of service to the veteran community. And I've learned how easy it is to have an impact. And so I think that to have an important impact on people's lives by just sharing like the thing that you like to do. And so if anybody's out there and listening and wants to get involved, just contact me. All right. Hey there, Austin. Greetings from San Antonio. From my friend Ricky. Liza, what's the reason why most people don't finish an ultra? I think it's twofold. I think one, a little bit of what I was saying before is they don't expect to feel as badly as they do or badly as often as you do during an ultra. And so that throws them for a loop. And then I think the other, and yeah, and like when they have particular race goals and then they're not meeting those goals, it's hard to climb out from under that. And so I think there's like this big mental component of just getting down on yourself and convincing yourself that, you know, you can't do this thing. I think that's huge. I think the other part of it is just not preparing for some of the environmental challenges that a lot of ultras have, be it, you know, primarily heat and cold, just not being ready to deal with like a sudden rainstorm where you get drenched, not having the gear, not having the wherewithal to know that you need to change out at an aid station and get warm stuff on, not recognizing the signs and symptoms of getting overheated, and just not knowing how to take care of yourself in order to go ahead and perform. Like you did all this running training and basically the environment throws these things at you that you're not able to deal with, and then you're not able to run. And then, you know, and then along with that, like not having stuff to deal with blisters kind of along the way would be a big one. I mean, I think that, you know, a lot of people have nutrition issues during ultras and they'll get sick to their stomach and vomit and stuff like that. But for the most part, most ultras have cutoffs where as long as you can keep like a 17 to 20 minute pace, you know, which is just a determined hike, you can finish and you don't need to be taking in calories to be hiking. And so like a lot of people will talk about nutrition, and I think really that derails like a certain time at a race, but not necessarily finishing the race. And so I think that like throws people off, like I can't take anything in and I can't finish this, which isn't necessarily the case. I think, you know, like when you have a crew that's experienced, it's so nice because then they can just tell you like, okay, like we're going to get you out of these wet clothes. We're going to put dry clothes on you. We're going to feed you, like sit here for a little while. We're totally fine. You know, let's get going. And so, yeah, I think, and so along those lines, I really suggest that anybody who's likes running on trails should take a wilderness first aid course. And so I teach those for the National Outdoor Leadership School, and there are other companies in the United States. And basically, everything that gets taught in a wilderness first aid course, which is a 2-day course, so you can take it over the weekend, is stuff that you're going to encounter on the trail, like, you know, cold emergencies, heat emergencies, lightning, you know, cuts and scrapes, bone breaks. Hopefully you're not encountering that too much, you know, low sugar, just all this stuff. And so it really sets you up well for that, taking good care of yourself on the trail, so then you're able to complete the run, and also taking good care of, you know, somebody else. It's huge. Like if you have those skills, you are so valuable as a crew person or somebody volunteering at a race. So if you want to know more about that, send me a note. Alrighty. If you were planning to race Ricky, Scotty asked, and you wanted to get in his head, what would be the best way? It's a good question. I'm gonna think on that right now and move on to the next question. Hey there, Steven. Oh, apparently Ricky says Oreos would be good. Let's see here. Do I have a coach? How did you decide or pick that coach? That's such a good question. Yeah, I totally have a coach. I've had a coach most of my running career, for the reason that a lot of people have coaches. I need accountability, like knowing that somebody is looking at what I've done and cares that I've done it, gets me out the door. I like to please people, and so knowing that, like, hey, it says that I should do, 10 miles on my plan, I'm going to do 10 miles, that's really important and helpful to me. It really helps me be consistent, and so I do it for that accountability. I also do it as I have a coach because sometimes I'll try to do too much, and so it's really nice to just have someone who has an objective opinion. Like, that's ridiculous, you can't do like this race, this race, this race, all clumped together, that's dumb. But also, coaches are great because they can recognize these patterns, and so to have somebody else saying like, look, for this last week you felt like garbage, or this has been hurting you, we need to change things. And I think, for ultra runners, it's just really hard not to ignore small pains, and then and then it snowballs into something that causes you to take a lot of time off. And so I rely on my coach to go ahead and recognize that for me and tell me that I need to not run. And so the other thing for me is like, I love positive affirmation. Like, it makes me feel great. Like when I got stickers on my papers in elementary school, like that was very satisfying. And so I look for a coach that does a lot of communicating and, tells me that I'm great. It's helpful. It's really helpful to me. And so I think figuring out what motivates you is huge. Like, do you need somebody looking every day to see what you're doing for that accountability? Do you need somebody, is it useful to you to have somebody telling you like that you're doing a good job? Or do you need somebody who's gonna, analyze the data and, look for patterns that way? Just figuring out like what's going to be most motivating for you to run consistently, because that's the secret. Like, you have to be able to run consistently, and so you got to figure out like what is that thing that's going to allow you to run consistently, and can you find someone that's going to support whatever that thing is for you. So there's that. Steve, what would you say is the best attribute for an athlete to have to make it easy to coach him or her? Somebody who likes to talk and share information about themselves. Like, the more you tell your coach, the more that they're able to modify your training plan so that it fits your needs. Like, if I don't know what's going on, if I don't know that, something's bothering you just a little bit, physically some pain, if I don't know that you haven't been sleeping, if I don't know you're super stressed by work, like, then I can't say like, oh, well, it makes sense for us to cut back. Or if I don't know that you're loving like, the training that we're doing as far as like the speed work or whatever, then I don't know that, yeah, this is great and it's working, let's go ahead and add some more. Or if I don't know that you like hate hill work, like you'll do it and it's completed, but you're not telling me like, I dread this and it's a big hassle for me to get to a hill where I live, then I can't do a good job. And so I love people who like really do a lot of commenting and letting me know what's going on for them. Let's see, Mark, you mentioned family, work, training balance being a strength of yours. Best tip or advice on this? Whew. Yeah, so I don't know that there's a best tip. I would say that, I do think like number one, figuring out how you can get good sleep so that you can maintain good humor, as well as perform well. And so kind of carving that time out first in your schedule, and then really looking like, okay, how much time do I have? Like, then taking the work blocks out, and traveling to work, and then like, what am I going to do? Like, what are the family needs? And then looking at what you have left and seeing like, okay, realistically, what can I do? So I think that realism is really important. Like, what do I actually have available to me based on my priorities, right? And so there's that. I think like getting your family involved is really helpful. So, like bringing, once COVID is over and we can have families at races again, like having your family out there volunteering at an aid station is a really great way to help get them to understand what you're doing if they're not interested in running at all, because the community is so great. And so they're at an aid station, they're making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and they're meeting all these nice people, and they're seeing all these other runners. Like, so if they think you're some sort of like crazy nut for the training that you're doing, they're like, oh look, like they're not an entirely crazy nut, there's a whole community of people. And then like having them at the finish line and they can watch like the emotion as people finish these races, it gives them an appreciation for it. And so that's really important. And so those are two really big ones. My husband um, is a climber. He's looking at me. Is a climber and not a runner by nature. So slowly brought him over. And the thing that I did in order to really be successful, and now he's run a couple of ultras, is we started doing a beer Tuesday, like in our front yard. And so we'd all go, like I'd invite the whole trail running group over, and we'd do like a little nominal run, and then we'd have beer, and that was the thing that drew him into the community. And so I think that there's that. So like to be realistic, to be willing to be a little bit creative sometimes and not compare yourself to others. And so like I've got kids doing virtual schooling here, and so for me, my day looks like I'll get up at 4 in the morning and I'll work until like 6:30 in the morning, and then I'll get the kids set, and then I'll go out on like an hour run, and then I might need to do some work or kids, and then do another run, and sometimes there's another run in there, and that's not ideal for sure, but it's a way that I can make the training that I feel like I need to do happen. So yeah, so get your family on board, get sleep, be realistic, and give beer. Todd, do you use heart rate as a training tool? If so, how do you use it to guide race strategy? Do you train in a certain zone? Do you stay in that training zone? Or do you use more intuition to guide you? I used to use a heart rate monitor a lot with my training, and I found it was really, really useful. The coach that I was working with at the time really thought that it would be helpful. I remember being super frustrated though, because she actually gave me the zones, and I couldn't have any coffee before I ran, or else like just like walking fast, my heart rate would go too high. And I would be very frustrated trying to run with a group of people because my heart rate would ding, and I'd be like, and so. But I did it for, gosh, like maybe probably 2 years, and so now at this point I have a good sense of what an easy effort should be for me, and when I'm pushing a little bit too hard. With the athletes that I coach, I use it really to help with their recovery runs, to make sure they're not going too fast. That's the thing that most people do. Like they run their easy runs too hard and their hard runs too easy, and so I'll have folks look at their recovery, I'll look at the pace, the heart rate for their recovery runs, and just see, how fast are they going with this. And sometimes I'll give limiters like, hey, let's not go, above 150 beats per minute. And those numbers are really kind of like rules of thumb, more than any sort of objective science. But I feel like for most folks, it works pretty well. And people are surprised a lot of times. They're just unaware that they're working harder than they should. So I don't use it for hard training. I'll do that on effort. Like if something feels hard, if we go out and we're like, hey, let's run, 3 by 3 minutes hard, and you go and you run and it feels hard, then it's doing what we need it to do. And so for a lot of reasons, I won't use heart rate for something like that. So there's that. And then race strategy wise, like definitely keeping your heart rate below a certain rate for the first half of a race. I've done that with a lot of people, and I've done that myself, to just be like, it's so hard to know what a good starting pace is, because you're all tapered and you feel great, and we know that everybody starts out too hard. Not everybody, but most people start out too hard, and then they kind of crash and burn towards the end of it. And so I've done that for the first half of a race. Then after that, like, we've got this, kind of heart rate creep. And so it just kind of goes up as the effort goes on. And so it's not as useful then. Yeah. We talked with Brian Powell the other week when he was talking to the Band of Runners folks, and he was saying that sometimes he'll use his heart rate monitor at the end of a race to make sure that he's pushing hard enough. Like if he's had a hard time and he's kind of feeling down, he'll be like, it's only 90. You can push harder. I've never done that myself. Let's see. From my friend Rob, how much of an ultra is mental toughness, and can mental toughness be developed? I don't know that it's mental toughness so much as, I think it's mental, but I don't know that toughness is necessarily the word. I think it's that the people who are successful have figured out why doing this hard thing is useful to them, is valuable to them. And so when something's valuable to you, you find a way to get it done. And so I think that there's a lot of mental strategy in doing an ultra. I think that yeah, so I don't know that, and honestly, I think that a lot of people who are very, like what we would describe as like a really tough person who's overcome a lot of stuff, a lot of times they're not initially successful in ultras um, because of like what I described a little bit earlier, because sometimes it isn't like overcoming something as much as struggling mentally with not wanting to do something anymore, and or like this lack of desire that will overcome you. So yeah. How to develop that, I think, is just just spending some time about like what is valuable about doing this to me. Like, let me list those things out. Is that something that I'm going to be able to draw on at mile 70 and 100-mile race? So yeah. Let's see. Do you ever find yourself with overusage injuries, and how do you deal with them? Yes, and I curse. It's so hard. Yeah, and so I really I do a lot of, I'm really bad about, doing stretching and rolling and prehab type things prior to getting injured. And so basically, like when something pops up, that's the thing that and so there's a website that I use that I'm like, that has a little body, and it's like, oh, I'm hurting here, and it'll show me the stretches and things that I need to do. And so I also have recently started to use one of those Theraguns that a friend gifted me. And I find that that's really helpful, especially now that you can't kind of go out and get massages, and also because massages are like a nice, a big expense to do regularly, that Theragun has been really helpful as well. I use a foam roller to kind of figure out like what's wrong, like what's tight, what might become a problem. But I hate foam rolling with all my heart, and so like I know that it's a good thing to do, and I recommend that to people, but I just find it hard to like get down on the ground, because then usually I'm thinking about I should vacuum. Okay. Training masters athletes, men 60 plus, women 50 plus. What modifications do you make? I really love working with athletes who are not 20. I like you 20-year-olds too, but because it's not. We haven't figured it out exactly how to do it. And so it really is, like a lot of discussion. I think that making sure that somebody is getting good sleep, I'm harping on the sleep, sorry. And then also just figuring out like what is the recovery that's necessary? Like that's the key, right? And so usually, like, does it mean that we need to do 2-week blocks of training rather than a week block of training where we have, like one speed workout in there and one long run in there? Or can we do, 3 hard workouts within that 2-week block? Or do we need to work in 3-week blocks? Or, or are we doing 2 weeks of work and then a recovery week? And so it really is this, this a trial and error of like, yeah, how are you feeling? How did this run go? Okay, let's space this out. Let's space the days out, and figuring that. So it's like, if you can figure out what the recovery needs to be, then that athlete has the potential to continue to improve. And so I've been writing these articles about, athletes who are 45 and above, who are continue to perform really, really well at races, and it's been really fun talking to all these folks and trying to see if there's some magic elixir. So far, no luck. But all those interviews are over at irunfar.com, and so if you just Google age-old athletes over there, all those will pop up, and so you can see how those folks have modified their workouts as well. So let's see. Chris, how does one cope with injuries and the wait time to come back? Man, it's so hard. Like, it would be so easy, right? If you just knew when it would be over. If you're like, hey, 2 months from now, I will be fine, and then I can start training again, and then you would just fill those 2 months. And so I think that, the tolerance for uncertainty is is a very valuable character trait. Um, and so I think that during that time when you're injured, looking for other things that you enjoy that are going to support you when you're able to start running again. And so, like it's a lot of times it'll be for the folks that I'm working with, it'll be times when they start concentrating on the weight training, or, they're stretching their core strength, things like that, so that all the things that they don't have time to do when they're running a lot of miles, so that they're set up for success. They're really sturdy when they do come back. So all all those mobility exercises and things like that. There's so much out there that you can work on that'll make you a better runner. If you need to improve your diet, like this is an excellent time to work on that while you're healing, and it'll help with the healing as well. And I think the other thing too is to just like hang on to that hope or that knowledge that this is unlikely to last forever. Like it's going to stop. And when it does stop, like I want to be in a place where I'm ready to spring back into things again. So, yeah. Let's see. And just, and just be kind to yourself too. And the last thing I'll say on that note is just that, it has to be things that you like, though. I don't think it's useful to fill your time with stuff that you hate, even if it is going to help you do well when you run again. Because if you're if you're spending all this time being sad and doing things that you don't like to do, I don't know that that's really helpful for healing. And so maybe it's a time that you totally redirect and do other things that you've had to ignore because of your running. Yeah. Okay. How much strength and mobility do you integrate? Not enough, Don. I do not integrate that enough. I would like to do a lot more. All I can manage to carve out time for at this point is running and doing some mobility work so that I'm able to run. I think that the people who are able to carve out time for strength training are less likely to get injured, and that they're much more capable. But for me, it's just something that I can't, I have a hard time. Yeah, I have a hard time doing. I can only ignore my children so much. Speaking of COVID, any suggestions for runners that have contracted COVID in their return to activity to running? Man, it's so hard. I think that knowing, kind of like an ultra, that knowing that that it seems likely that people are going to have relapses where they feel rotten, and so to be patient with the coming back. I mean, I think that, we've read information stories at this point of people trying to come back too fast once they start feeling good again, and then, really kind of taking, 4 steps back at that point, and having a hard time. So I think doing a little less than you think you should, making your timeline for racing greater than you think it needs to be, and just being willing to back off, to change the schedule. So maybe it's 2 days on and 1 day off, or 1 day on and 1 day off. So kind of like we were talking with masters athletes, just figuring out what that recovery needs to be in order to go. And it's so hard too for us, especially when you're looking at ultra running, because to get advice from medical professionals, because most all of them will be like, oh no, those are crazy distances, and so it's just a little bit hard. Yeah. Let's see. How are you motivating your athletes with so many races canceled or modified? Yeah, I mean, we've done so for a little while, folks were excited about the virtual races that were going on, and so a lot of folks did virtual races, and so we have, so I'll let the team know what everybody's doing, and so that was kind of helpful to folks. I think that most everybody on my team is done with virtual races. Don't find them very motivating to get out the door. So a lot of folks have started to take on some, local adventures. So trying to do not necessarily fastest known times, but looking at those routes and thinking, oh, I'd like to try this route. So doing that, I think too. Talking about a little bit about okay, well, let's plan for the second half of 2021. I always tell folks we'll train up to a race. We just can't hold on to it too tightly, right? Because it might not be there. But if it goes away, then we're in a good place for the next one. And so just kind of, like a lot of it is just like, yeah, making peace with the fact that we don't know what's going to happen, whether this race is going to happen or not. So I think like most people have kind of settled into that at this point. And I don't know, like, and I think they very much bought in to the fact that if they run consistently through this, then when they get out the other end, then they're going to be able to do a lot of fun things. And so the folks that I'm working with have been able to get out the door without too much trouble at all. And I think, and I think that's another benefit of the coach too, that person who's like telling you to get out. Like for me, if I didn't have a coach, I'd be much more likely to like lay on the couch and be like, doesn't matter. Let's see here. Janelle, possibly working on breathing exercises when not actually exercising to increase lung capacity. Yeah, I mean, I think that could be useful for sure. I think it's one of those things, though, that, like, your tolerance from, you were replying to Stephen. Janelle is a very smart nurse, and that was what she was answering for the COVID question, as far as his return to running, or if you've had COVID, working on breathing exercises. Very good advice, Janelle, of course. I feel like we had this last time where you put in like advice and I was like, that's an interesting question. Very good. Let's see here. Are you taking on new coaching clients? Why, yes, Matt, I am taking on new coaching clients. My children need to go to college. Let's see here. Yeah, no, I am taking on new coaching clients. I have, I think, 1 or 2 spots right now. And so there is that. Any training or racing tips for those backyard types of races? Let's see. I think that those are such fun events. And are you doing one, Dean? I'm assuming. I think probably, like, I have not done one. I've worked with people who have done them. I think that especially the older you are as an athlete, like the harder it is to start up again, the stiffer. And so kind of figuring out the way, like, to make your body feel a little bit better, to get up and get going again. I think that figuring out how, really trying to go a long, long time, figuring out how you're going to sleep. But I think it's one of those things that you can't really learn or like practice, it's something that you learn by doing one of those. And then you're like, oh, that didn't work at all. And so let's see here. Yeah, I guess I don't have too many backyard ultra tips. I need to do one so I can have more tips next time. Maybe that'll be my goal for 2021. Sweet. Well, my friends, we have been here for quite a while, and I need to get my daughter back to virtual first grade. So Dr. Matt Lay will be the last of the coaches for Sharman Ultra who will do a question and answer session, and you should definitely all come back and ask him a bunch of questions. His session is next week, and if you look on the Sharman Ultra page, it'll tell you the exact time and date for his talk. And yeah, he can answer all your intricate physiology questions. So there you go. Alrighty. All right. I will see you all back here next year.